2021 Wilson School Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Page?
Here.
Mrs. Casper? Here. Dr. Kennedy? Here. Mrs. Cocker? Here. Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance Mr. Maravich, we have, I believe, one person speaking on agenda items this evening.
So I'll read the rules of public participation. Rules of public participation for school board meetings pursuant to the Sunshine Law, Robert's Rules, and Board Policy. The following are the rules of public participation. Individuals attending this meeting are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner, does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but instead is an opportunity to offer comment on matters that are or before the board. All comments must be directed to the board as a body and not to any individual board member or administrator. Clapping, calling out, or cheering during public comment is not permitted, nor are conversations in the audience. Individuals may not approach the board tables. Individuals should make their comments from the lectern. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Anybody making any threats, personal, offensive, impertinent remarks, or become unruly may be removed from the meeting or may be cited by the police. The above expectations are outlined in Board Policy 903, which is embedded in the board docs on the district's website.
Thank you. Mrs. Cocker?
Transportation issues and wages.
I'd like to begin my time with comments from a board member made via email to me in regards to living wages. I think this board would accept their fellow members' challenge to properly address the wage gap the school district pays its transportation staff. And I quote, "We really need to reassess how we value work in this country, as many of our local workers were deemed essential, but were not valued as such, e.g. denied a living wage, forced to work amid a raging deadly virus, no or limited access to child care, no or limited access to benefits." So I challenge this board, why are we not following the words of some of its own members? On August 16th at the board meeting, we heard from another member how our district pays up to $4 an hour less than other opportunities in the county. In subsequent dialogue I've had with others in the community, the disparity in wages seem to range from $2 to $4 an hour less. The lack of benefits, summer hiatus, broken work schedule simply consternate these problems. Why do we actively choose to pay less? Choose to have middle school students get on the bus at 6:40 in the morning, as does a friend of my son. In light of COVID, which would seemingly have no end in sight, why would we choose to face this issue every year as a board? At present, Wilson School District isn't doing anything to foster a system of new CDL drivers, despite having their career center as an accessible platform. So why would we expect anything to change? Is the doubling up of bus schedules really the best answer this group can come up with? Is this the best leadership our board can offer? 8/16, there was no immediate discussion of pay raises after that was brought to light. As such, the community ends up banding together to help solve problems, neighbor helping neighbor, which is great, I applaud it. However, I wonder if this board's going to look to adjust any tax bills as a result of deficiencies in transportation services. In the private world, the world that I live in and the businesses that I own, this is common recourse, but in the public world, I likely know the answer. So my hope is tonight that you'll undertake the discussion needed to address this issue, to offer these bus drivers support staff who help our students get to school safely in a timely manner so it isn't so burdensome on the students and on the parents.
1 minute.
I'd hope that you should come up with a new package that's fair across all levels, that the lesson learned of disparate wage increases with our cafeteria workers isn't repeated. There's no value in making people beg for a fair wage or to make them ask for a fair wage their peers are being paid. So I hope the board focuses on this topic with the same level of equity and fairness that they choose to approach other topics. As an example, I'll state for the record, as a business owner, 10 years ago, I paid $10 an hour for a delivery driver. This year, I hired somebody at $17 an hour, graduating to $19 an hour with full benefits, IRA, vacation at 6 months. That's how you address work. You adjust the pay package. You make it respond to the marketplace. That's what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to take this time to welcome our 2021-2022 Wilson School Board Student Representative, Ms. Maddie Negrini. Ms. Negrini is a senior at Wilson and president of Student Government. In addition, she serves as a mini-thon captain and is a member of the Mental Health Council. She is also captain of the varsity water polo and swim teams and part of the high school orchestra. Outside of school, Maddie is a volunteer swim coach and teaches swim lessons. I'm looking forward to working with Ms. Negrini during this year as a representative of her peers to our school board and community. Ms. Negrini, thank you and welcome. Any words of wisdom? You can choose to defer later, or you can have something now.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really grateful for this, and I'm honored to be able to represent my school district.
Thank you. We look forward to having you.
Thank you.
Looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the school board meeting held on August 16, 2021, as attached. Looking for a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Martin first. Do we have a second? Mr. Schneider second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Sorry. Opposed? Sorry. Go ahead. You're right. We did meet in executive session this evening to discuss personnel issues. I'm sorry for that. Thank you. No, thank you. Payment of bills, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for payment of bills tonight the amount of $2,843,552.01.
Looking for a second? Mr. McCray, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini? Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Fadley.
Thank you, President Hart. This evening, I present the superintendent's report, which is inclusive of personnel and program recommendations.
Looking for a motion to approve superintendent items 4.1 through 4.9 as presented.
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first, second, Mr. Martin. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Human Resources, 5.1, looking for a motion to approve 2 new full-time assistant athletic trainers for the middle school at an annual salary of $45,000. 5.2, request approval of mentors and department heads. Looking for a motion to approve human resource items agendas 5.1 through 5.2 as presented.
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first, do we have a second?
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Student Services, 6.1, request permission to contract with Schuylkill Valley School District for 1 special education student to attend the Wilson School District for the 2021-22 school year. 6.2, request approval of 2021-2022 RSY News Story contract for 2 special education students. 6.3, request permission to waive tuition as attached. Looking for a motion to approve Student Services agenda items 6.1 through 6.3 as presented. Mrs. Casper first, do you have a second? Dr. Kennedy, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Technology and Media, 7.1, request permission to add Brad Hart, Board President, as an authorized signatory for lease agreements with Dell Financial Services. Looking for a motion? Mr. Schneider first, do you have a second? Mr. Case, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Abstain.
8 yes, 1 abstain.
Under Operations, 8.1, request to approve a change order for the high school roof project. It was a deduct, which is nice to see, for $24,609,005. $24,609.05. Thank you. That's what I meant to say. Thank you. It's the vision thing, you know. Looking for a motion? Mr. Negrini first. Do you have a second?
Second case.
Mr. Case, any discussion?
Mr. Hart.
Yes, Dr.
Just want to call out the work of Mr. Jeff Simcox and being very, very detail-oriented. This is a benefit to the district. Typically, when boards see change orders, it's in the other direction where it's costing us additional money. This is a $24,609 savings to the district because of his work and attention to detail.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Finance, request permission to create a Class of 2025 student activity account in the high school for the Activities Fund. 9.2, request approval to transfer the remaining balance from the Class of 2020 of $3,325.23 to the student government as per Board Policy 618. 9.3, request to rename existing tennis student activity fund to Girls Tennis Student Activity Fund. 9.4, request to create a Boys Tennis Activity Fund. 9.5, approve finance agenda items 9.1 through 9.4 as presented. Looking for a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Martin first. Do you have a second? Mr. Snyder second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
9.6, request permission to receive the nomination of the board treasurer for July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. Looking for a motion?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first. Do you have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 9.7, request permission to elect Michael Martin as board treasurer for July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022 term. Looking for a motion? Mr. Schneider first. Do you have a second?
Case second.
Mr. Case, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Sorry about this one, Mr. Martin. Request permission to set the treasurer's salary at $0 for July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. Looking for a motion?
McCray.
Mr. McCray first. Do you have a second?
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Under Transportation, 10.1, request approval of a contract with New Roads Transportation for transportation of including an aid of students to and from the Vista School. 10.2, request approval of a contract with Ephrata Mennonite School for the transportation of students to Ephrata Mennonite School. Looking for a motion to approve transportation items 10.1, 10.2 as presented.
So moved.
We have a first. Do we have a second?
Cocker?
Mr. Case, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
We don't have any policies up for review. Under miscellaneous, we have PSBA officer elections. Mrs. Cocker?
Yes. For President-elect, one-year term, David Schaff. Vice President, one-year term, Elton Mathis. East Zone Representative, Edward Brown. PSBA Insurance Trust Trustee, Richard Frerick, William Lakoff, and Nathan Means.
Thank you. That is our slate of elected officials for PSBA. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Martin first. Do I have a second? Mr. Schneider, second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Under committees, Berks Career and Technology Center, Mrs. Casper.
I have no report. Our next meeting is August 24th.
Wilson Equity Task Force, Mrs. Casper.
I have no report.
Berks County IU, Dr. Kennedy.
Okay. No, I wrote it in the little, oh, there it is. It took a while to pop up. It popped up. Okay. At the last meeting, the BCIU approved its updated health and safety plan. On Tuesday, August 17th, 2021, the BCIU held its BCIU Start of the Year State of the Unit with the officers joining staff via a combination of Zoom and socially distant in-person meetings, and that included a welcome video. The videos produced by the BCIU are always pretty fantastic. The BCIU got a new financial system. The new system is called the Financial Information System, commonly referred to as FIS. The next BCIU board meeting is Thursday, September 16th, 2021. The curriculum committee has not met since May, and our next meeting is this month.
Our next meeting is next Monday, September 13th at noon in this room or upstairs in the pre-board room.
No report.
Finance, Mr. Martin.
No report.
Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Yes, just a couple things. As you know, our legislators are on summer break. I believe the Senate returns on the 20th and the General Assembly returns on the 27th. But there's a couple of big issues that they're going to be toying with when they come back, which is going to take some of their time. One of them is, as you know, that Pennsylvania lost an electoral vote due to its population. So the redistricting is going to start going on. That should prove to be quite interesting on how that's done, because obviously it's always a very heated debate, but it has to get done by the next election, so it's going to be interesting. Also, another big topic is the funding of the roads in Pennsylvania. Right now, there is approximately 14.5 billion funding gap to establish Pennsylvania roads to what they consider in par with other states. The gas tax isn't cutting it, as you know. More people drive electric cars. Cars are more efficient, so it's really cut down into the revenues. So they're trying to look at ways of increasing taxes in some other areas. But that's going to be a huge thing because of the necessity for them to get the funding, especially from the feds coming in. They've got to start coming up with a source of revenue to cover that $14.5 billion. Revenues for the month of July were down, and they were down, but they weren't really down because last year they borrowed from this one fund, put in another fund. So overall, it was up about $200 million, but it's really difficult. You have to page for these documents to get some of this information. So right now, it's on target with what was passed back in June. And I believe that should do it for right now.
Thank you. Human Resources, no report. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Good evening. Just wanted to report out that students and staff across the district will be commemorating the memory of 9/11 this week. All of our buildings will have special activities planned, some of which include the JROTC, placing flags throughout our high school campus, flag ceremonies at our buildings, special projects, presentations, and more. These activities will provide our students and staff with the opportunity to remember the victims and honor the heroes of 9/11. In addition, I wanted to let you know that last week we emailed out our first edition of the 2021-2022 Bulldog Blitz. We will continue to send a blitz out every week through the end of the school year. And families who do not currently receive the Blitz but would like to can sign up on the public relations page of our district website. This is a great way to stay up to date on all the great things happening here at Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
Yeah, just a couple of items. The Wilson Education Foundation had a message here. They'll be meeting on October 17th. In the meantime, the teachers and staff can submit their applications for the fall 2021 venture grants, which are open right now. So more to come with that on what's picked and what kind of great projects the teachers and the staff come up with for the venture grants. Big deal is the Bulldog Bash. So save the date for October 9th. It's a Saturday, 6:30 p.m. It's a big celebration and a great fundraiser for the Ed Foundation. Tickets are on sale, and you could be a sponsor as well, and you can go to our website and see more about that. That's it.
Thank you. Technology, Mr. Schneider.
I have no report.
Student Outreach, Ms. Natty Negrini.
The first 2 weeks of school have been really exciting. I think that, especially with the senior class, we've all just been a lot more appreciative with this new normal and everybody's time. First of all, there's a new Bulldog period being implemented. On every Tuesday, we'll have an hour block at the end of the day in which students are really encouraged to get involved and join a school club. And many teachers are founding new clubs. Some right off the bat include a gardening club, an outdoor enthusiast club, and a mountain biking club, all of which just catering to different interests. This past Friday, Wilson versed Governor Mifflin in the infamous whiteout game, and although unfortunately we lost this game, an even bigger win that came from this was a Wilson versus Mifflin food drive. Both student governments came together and they raised hundreds of canned food good donations that were all donated to the Helping Harvest Food Bank. Lastly, the Wilson Minithon is having their Gold Out football game on September 17th. And this raises money for the Four Diamonds Foundation, which goes to pediatric cancer research. And in addition to the game and festivities, there will also be a car wash at Fulton Bank right by Giant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Negrini. It's nice having you on the board with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Maravich, we do have public participation on non-agenda items. I'm sorry, yes, non-agenda items.
Same rules apply, 3 minutes.
No. All right, go ahead. Mrs. Clapper?
First is Megan Epler.
Good evening. I just wanted to say, we moved here 3 years ago, and we came to Wilson because this was always known as the best school district in Berks County. Shiloh Hills is one of the best elementary schools in the entire state of Pennsylvania. That being said, I put a lot of faith, I guess, into the administration and the school board that you guys had things under control. But coming to these meetings lately, I'm seeing otherwise. And my biggest, I guess, thing you could say lately, I've been making a lot of new connections and meeting a lot of parents from this school district. And I'm really disappointed by a story I just heard that happened to a friend's child last school year. Now, equity can be taught or said however you'd like it to be said. However, when a teacher in this district in an elementary school is telling kids they're racist because they're white, that she could have been their slave, why would a 10-year-old need to know that coming from a teacher? And the teacher still has her job, she still works here. How is that part of the curriculum? And how is that making equity, like how is that helping our cause at all with any of that? I do not want my kids being taught in that manner. My oldest has a receptive language delay, which affects his comprehension on things. So he would totally take that and not comprehend what you're saying, but hearing those words, I think that is very unacceptable. And I also think it's unacceptable that it wasn't further investigated. She is very upset as a parent, and she did come to the administration and nothing was done. And she was kind of made to feel like it just was okay. So I thought that all teachers kind of taught on the same curriculum, but are teachers doing their own thing now? Are they allowed to imply different rules now? I'm not understanding, and I just don't think that's acceptable for the school district or for my kids. Thank you very much.
Okay, Argy Hansen.
Good evening.
Evening.
I want to thank you all
for your time that you dedicate to our district, to our students, and for making some really tough choices this year. I'd really, first of all, like to thank you for creating a safe environment for our students to return to school in with as little interruption as possible, and having the foresight to do that from the beginning of the year rather than starting on a different foot and then having to backtrack and change some behaviors that might be already in place. I think most of you know that equity is something that's been in education for a long, long time. When we talk about things like IEPs, 504s, GIEPs, any accommodation that we make for any student is equity in education. It also helps to create access for people of different living experiences. That includes gender and race and sexuality. And creating an environment for our students to be able to talk about those things in a safe way, while encouraging them to manage their behaviors and have some social awareness and understanding and empathy is really important when we're putting them forth into the world. Where I work, we've had to have conversations about diversity and equity and sexual harassment and candor and how to have uncomfortable conversations. Wouldn't it be great if we could send our students out there already having some basis for what that looks like? Of course, talking about any of these subjects can cause some uncomfortable feelings. But we know that equity and talking about these things is not to embarrass anybody or to hurt anybody's feelings. When we talk about historical facts, there are things that have happened. And in a classroom environment, we want to encourage students of differing opinions to be able to voice those opinions in a safe place where they're talking about these issues. So I just want to thank you all for making these decisions and making our school a safe place.
Thank you.
Victor Talata.
Hello. I have a few comments on the topic of the educational equity policy. As it relates to educational equity, I am unaware of anyone who opposes additional or specialized needs-based assistance for students, regardless of race, gender, or other characteristics. This can be done without radically transforming the Wilson educational system and must be accomplished without lowering standards, teaching to the lowest students in any given classroom, or limiting opportunities afforded to the top-performing students, which has been a byproduct of equity policies in districts across the country. As it relates to the equity policy and whether this is a Trojan horse for CRT, on one hand, we've heard from board members and members of the community that the proposed equity policy is not focused on race and is not a Trojan horse for CRT. On the other hand, we've heard a board member who was on the equity task force explain that since being enlightened on CRT during grad school, she sees race in everything. We've heard that an article written by Paul Gorski, which is rife with what I'll describe as the tenets of CRT, is driving the work of Wilson's equity task force. This article includes the premise that most educational systems are systemically racist, even if the educators and administrators aren't. Educational systems must be transformed, and anyone that doesn't see racial issues must be canceled. This sounds like gaslighting to me. Moving forward, I encourage the board to pass a resolution explicitly barring the tenets of CRT from the Wilson educational system, including banning the modification of educational standards and the curriculum to achieve equity. I ask the board to proceed with an anti-CRT resolution before any subsequent work is performed on Wilson's equity policy. If I'm wrong and the equity policy is not a ploy to usher in the tenets of CRT, then the board should have no problem passing such an anti-CRT resolution to ensure safeguards are in place to prevent Wilson going from an exemplary educational system to just another woke, mediocre indoctrination mill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tammy Keener.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I've been coming to your board meetings for more than 10 years now, speaking on school property taxes and how it needs to be eliminated. Also, I have been all over the state in the last 14 years educating the public on SB 76 to eliminate school property taxes. The conditions of some homes that I've seen in my travels is appalling. Parents and residents, you should look at your mortgage statement and see how much lower your payment would actually be if this tax were eliminated. I can't believe you raised our taxes again, even though you have $10 million in reserve monies, according to the Treasury report on June 7th of 2021. And Wilson received $8,753,143 in COVID relief. Do you realize that more than 10,000 people a year are losing their homes to this barbaric tax, which is unconstitutional? At November election 2017, we the people boldly stated we wanted something done about this barbaric tax that holds our homes hostage to the school districts. The results of the referendum question on the ballot in Berks County was 77 to 23% in favor of some type of reform. These results clearly showed the people of PA hurting. This was a Homestead constitutional amendment. You as school board members, we vote for you, and you are public servants. You should have the respect of our vote and not raise our taxes. Yet you raised 5.3% in the borough and 5.6% in the township. In a time of inflation skyrocketing and a pandemic and people out of work. How is it that 5 school districts in Berks County did not raise their taxes at all this year, and 1 lowered their taxes 3 years in a row, and also lowered a mill building a new school? Inadequacies in the school apparently do exist, but you don't want to admit to them.
1 minute.
Lack of the school bus drivers, masking, and bullying does exist. In my opinion, one reason for bullying is caused by teaching the CRT or equity that pits our children against each other by the color of their skin. It further divides the children, it does not unite them. Masking our children is also unconstitutional. The PA Constitution states so that in 1967 amendment, the people have the right to clean air. As trustees of the resources in the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain for the benefit of all people. Therefore, according to this amendment, I believe it is a parent's choice if they mask their child or not. You are forcing them, and this is child abuse. Wilson used to be one of the best schools in the state. However, producing great athletes is not what we should be, not all we should be producing. Our country needs people who have all sorts of skills. We should encourage trade and prep students for the world, better society if they choose not to go to college. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Tony DiGirolamo. I've been practicing.
Well, I noticed that at a few school board meetings I've been at recently that a lot of people were expressing concerns about critical race theory being introduced into the curriculum potentially, while other members of the board and other people in the audience were confused as to how equity policy gets mixed with critical race theory. One group was saying no to CRT, and the other was saying, I'm confused, how are CRT and equity married together? Each group was sort of frustrated and talking past each other with no real communication to get anywhere with it. And Dr. Fadley assured us that at the last 2 SCORED meetings that he does not intend to introduce CRT into the Wilson School District curriculum. If that's true, then why not take CRT off the table by adopting a policy against CRT? This would eliminate the fear and a division caused by the topic and allows everybody to focus on the issue of equity, the true issue that you're really trying to get at with the policy and everything we're talking about. So I understand the board has been given a copy of this Paso-Robles Joint Unified. So if you already have it, I don't need to reintroduce it again? Okay. But I suggest that you look at that as potentially a model to start with anyway, to work through coming up with that resolution. Once you have a resolution and you've agreed to eliminate CRT, then you can really go after these inequities that are in the district. Dr. Fadley has charged the Equity Task Force to identify these inequities with real solutions as measured by a set of goals that you were going to have for the committee and for the district. At the last meeting, Dr. Kennedy mentioned an opportunity to work on equity issues. She brought up the makeup of the remedial summer school versus the advanced summer school, which I thought was pretty interesting. And that's one of the issues that maybe you want to pick to work against. The other one was, of course, the mix of the employees, the board members, the teachers, the janitors, everybody in the school. I mean, so there's a couple really good things there you could work on, get some experience with the equity issue, and come out of that maybe with something specific to the district, or, you know, maybe you solve them all with those two. I don't know, but that's something to think about. So that's all I really had, and I hope you'll consider these things. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Gary W. Rogers.
Good evening. For the last several weeks, we've been listening to many weaknesses and deficiencies in equity programs as implemented throughout the United States. We have listened to countless examples of equity being used to implement CRT practices, of students being divided into classes by racial makeup, and being informed that they are either a victim who cannot accomplish anything or an oppressor who is the reason that the victim cannot accomplish anything. While it's horrifying enough to imagine such a program being implemented within the Wilson School District, we have yet to talk about the actions which are being taken when the school districts who have implemented equity programs inevitably fail to meet their equity goals. Several weeks ago, Oregon announced that because of their inability to meet their equity goals, that students no longer need to be proficient in reading and writing in order to graduate. Los Angeles County Unified School District, having implemented their equity program without lowering their academic standards, is failing to meet any of their equity goals. As is no surprise, they discovered they cannot raise the lowest students to the highest academic levels. As a result, they have just released their new 700-page math program for next year. In it, they state that the gap between well-performing students and their less able peers must disappear, and they expect schools to deliver equity in the classroom. No gifted, talented, or advanced math tracking programs are to be used in any of the grade levels. We reject ideas of natural gifts and talents, they state, but go on to say that gifted California kids owe it to their peers to sacrifice their own opportunities for as long as they can in the name of equity. And finally, just a few months ago, Virginia announced it would streamline its educational equity program by replacing math with foundational concepts, ditching algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and calculus, and imposing the lowest common denominator model of teaching math, and wiping out the option of taking any advanced math course for any student before entering grade 11. So you see, before you decide how you're going to move forward on the equity concept, let me suggest, first, Superintendent Faley states that Wilson will not implement a CRT program. Great. Then he and the board should have no problem adopting an anti-CRT resolution. Second, Superintendent Faley states that one of his goals is to enhance student performance. Great. He and the board should have no problem passing a resolution that prohibits the lowering of academic standards and prohibits the elimination of advanced level math, science, engineering, and technology courses for any students who desire to take them. Be smart, learn from other districts' failures, pass the necessary resolutions to protect our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Giannakavo.
So again, is this on? We good? Okay. So I'd again like to begin with a word shared here from a board member to us. This was from the August 2nd meeting in regards to equity policy, critical race theory, community feedback, paraphrasing. But thanks to you all talking about critical race theory and race, now our students are asking more questions than ever before. Well, in light of the Wilson Equity Task Force video published in mid-January 2021, that board member's statement is in fact gaslighting us as the community for simply seeking answers to our questions. Let the record now show the Equity Task Force was already working on race, the discussions around race, long before we sought reasonable answers to reasonable questions. Our community's been told time and again that race and equity are two entirely different things, and I get that. Yet in that video, published at least 4 months prior to most anyone showing up in this room, in this community asking questions, some on this board, administration, and teaching community sought to conflate the two entirely. The task force seeks to combine the two and make race the leading conversation under the guise of equity. That said, I'm hopeful that our board can bring together a proper roundtable discussion on equity. Side note, I'm shocked that there was no discussion of that this evening in advance of the September 28th roundtable. So I hope the board can remove any and all references to things like the very dangerous Gorski article whereby the world is either racist or anti-racist, because the simple action of living in a single-family home today is now deemed as racist by some today in our society. The same types of people who control the definitions of what is and what isn't anti-racist. I wonder how many of our board members live in a single-family home. I wonder how many of our families of color live in a single-family home. How could that statement possibly exist? So this board and many in the media and society today say it's silly for community members across our nation to conflate critical race theory with equity. And yet when we read just the first 4 paragraphs on the CRT Wikipedia page, there are definitions, themes, contextual teachings that have all been echoed in this very boardroom, brought forth as important concepts that we must teach at Wilson. So which is it exactly? CRT Light, foundational elements of CRT, but not CRT? We're confused. We're asking these questions here. So the forthcoming roundtable is where you all should have started back in July of 2020 when you first held your first formal meeting on equity. It's odd to me that you didn't start there at all, because there's a very clear process, a process that I actually happen to mostly agree with that the PSBA offers. That should have been your first step in this process, not 14, 15 months later inviting the community in only after we all expend our time and energy this way. So I'll remind this board and administration that ultimately, if you're unhappy here with race in school and with how students are treated on the topic of race, is that 1 minute or is that 3?
Yeah, you're up.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
Craig Stoneha.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Craig Stoneha, Stonaha. I am a local business owner. My family's involved with multiple charities in the area. We go to a lot of events. We meet a lot of people. 2 years ago, I would have said that when I'm at these events, local politics is something that almost never comes up. In the last 6 months, though, I've heard more people bring up Wilson in a negative manner than ever before. Things like, why are they increasing our taxes so much? Why are they pushing equity so hard? Why are they fighting the parents constantly? In the last month, it's gotten even worse. 3 times, 3 separate people said a statement to me that kind of sums up the public opinion right now. It feels like Wilson is trying to start a civil war. This is how the public is starting to see the administration. This is becoming your legacy. We've had board members lecture us about our failures as a community, saying things like, where were you during No Child Left Behind? Well, apparently Common Core Math failed that board member because most of the parents who are fighting right now and who are speaking out were in grade school and college when that policy came out. We're given surveys and asked to provide our opinions, but no matter how emphatic we are, it never seems to matter. The board and the administration just kind of does what it wants and then moves on without explanation, as if it didn't just disrespect the entire community. We're told repeatedly that equity in Wilson is about helping people, and then we're given irrelevant examples like wheelchair ramps to stages. When we see no examples about students with special needs being told, you're on your own because we don't have a policy for that. ADA laws, anti-discrimination laws, the fact that we have a great community, make sure that these issues are always taken care of. And if they're not, that's what we should be talking about in this room, not equity. Another board member asked a few meetings ago about examples of issues we need to address with the equity policy. And I kid you not, the response was, we need the policy to find the problems. Creating teams and policies to hunt for problems is the very definition of a witch hunt. I mean, what's next? Do we raise taxes to figure out how to spend money?
1 minute.
The last 18 months, well, actually, finally, we're told that equity in Wilson has nothing to do with race, but then we see the video that just came out this year about the equity task force that focuses almost entirely on race. The last 18 months has seemingly destroyed decades of trust in the Wilson School District. Those of you on the board and the administration who support this new direction, please know that you are ripping our community apart. Those of you who are against what is happening in our district right now, it's time to stand up. Thank you.
Dwight Wegman.
Good evening. I have some quick comments before I get into my main topic. First, the Equity Tabletop Workshop application. The only participants allowed are students, parents, teacher support staff, and administrators. Including those groups makes sense. However, taxpayers without children in school whose money is used for education here at Wilson don't have a voice. That doesn't seem equitable to me. Second, we know of a number of rooms in the district did not have American flags to start the year, and there were also documented reports that the Pledge of Allegiance was not offered in some classrooms. I will credit Dr. Trickett for addressing this issue the very next day after the issue came to light. To me, the flag and the pledge are about as basic as it gets in education. So the question I have is, how does this happen? We have time and money for all other kinds of things here at Wilson, but the flag and the pledge are neglected? I believe this is telling us that we need to get back to basics and fundamentals before we go looking to implement other initiatives. Now I want to share an article that was published on September 1st in City Journal titled Mainline Madness by Michael Torres. It documents the progression of an equity policy and CRT at the Lower Merion School District, just outside of Philadelphia. If the Gorski article was considered to be required reading, then the City Journal article should also be required reading for the board and every community member who has an interest in equity and CRT. It is a chilling and appalling account of what has happened at Lower Merion over the past 20 years. Some key takeaways are: 1, anyone who may have a different view about the school's position on race and equity is intimidated into silence. 2, the goal of bringing lower achieving students up to meet higher cognitive expectations was eventually shelved for racially distinguished expectations. So how is that improving their outcome and preparing them to work in the real world? And 3, then there is the children's book, Not My Idea, a book about whiteness that was taught to 4th and 5th graders. Its final page is, quote, a contract binding you to whiteness, unquote, telling white children that they've been permitted to quote, get stolen land, stolen riches, special favors, unquote, and to, quote, mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color for the purpose of profit, unquote. The book then asks the child to sign on a red line below which a note says, quote, land, riches, and favors may be revoked at any time for any reason, unquote. Now, this Wilson administration and board will say that we would never let such a thing happen at Wilson. So I believe we do need a resolution banning the teaching of CRT at Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Marie Stoneha.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Marie Stoneha, S-T-O-N-A-H-A. I first want to thank our administration for a great meeting today, and I'm hoping that my speech tonight continues that with the board. I'm here tonight not just as a parent, but as an internationally recognized facilitator, coach, and leader in diversity and inclusion, equity, communication, and more. I've had the great experiences of rolling out equity and diversity plans to many different organizations, both nationally and internationally. And based on my experience, I can say that the path that Wilson is currently taking is heading for failure. Here's why. First, your lack of transparency. You repeatedly told us at board meetings, the equity forum, and one-on-one meetings that equity is about more than race. However, when we look at the survey that you sent out to better understand the needs of students, it only had race-based questions. And it was also only sent to a select group of students. We watched your equity promotion video, and again, all race-based. You held student-led focus groups that, again, focused on race. Every agenda item on the Equity Task Force meeting is race-based and focused, and all of your professional development this year was focused around race this year. So why would anyone believe that equity is more than just race? One comment from the video showed that students were asked if they experienced racism at Wilson. Overwhelmingly, every single student said no, but they knew someone who had. This was viewed as a breakthrough in the video. What's interesting is that's the most common answer to this question. We all believe that we have witnessed racism firsthand, but the reality is we haven't. And when you study this, you learn this and you learn why. We all believe we experienced racism because most likely we saw something on social media, we saw something on TV, heard a story from a friend. But thankfully, when you have trained professionals to dig in and think through this experience, we realize we haven't actually experienced racism firsthand. We just feel like we have. When studying this, you also learn that true racism means the intent behind the act has to be 100% race-based. That means that the intent cannot be that they didn't like the person, they're a bully, they're jealous, angry. It has to have the intent of race. Now, this doesn't mean that racist acts don't happen, but what it does mean is the actual percentage is much lower than we all feel it is. Any certified leader has to spend hundreds of hours understanding all of this and so much more before they ever get in front of a group of students, anyone, and have these conversations. I'm unsure who made the reckless decision to have students lead these conversations, but I encourage you, do not do it again. Anyone who knows about race conversations knows that a bad race conversation is so much worse than no race conversation. And while this is of no fault to those students, they were put at risk by the very team that is claiming to protect them. I encourage this board to stop while you're ahead. You are headed down a failed path. I have seen this path and it destroys cultures. You are hurting the very students that you think you're protecting. Please rethink your strategy.
Thank you.
Val Delp.
Good evening. I'm a mother of two and aunt to 4 students in the school district. I understand there's going to be an equity policy workshop that members of the community can apply to be a part of. I think that is a good first step towards transparency, if there will be fair and equal representation of varying viewpoints included, so there can be an open discussion and an appropriate solution developed. But my concern is, how are the workshop members being selected, and how can we be sure that all viewpoints are represented? I'm also a little concerned that this is a bit too little too late, and we should have started with community input before an equity task force was created. While we're here discussing how to implement this equity policy, I'm more than a little concerned that there are aspects of it that have already been put into this year's curriculum without a vote. Let me give you 3 examples. On the second day of classes, 9th grade honors U.S. history students received an assignment on inequity that showcased the Black Lives Matter movement. The course description on the school website states that the class will examine growth of the United States from the 1860s to the modern era. The course will challenge students to develop connections across various examples in the material, as well as how past events and issues affected the 21st century. So, if the students are meant to make connections from past events and how they impact current events, why are we starting with the present? And why are we using an organization that champions violence and destruction as a means for justice as the example? Number 2, some in this administration have told us repeatedly that the equity policy is mostly about financial disparity. And again, we uncovered that video production posted on the school's YouTube channel highlighting the Equity Task Force's plan, and the sole focus was race. Not a single point about financial disparity or any other equity issue.
1 minute.
Number 3, the online syllabus for the 12th grade course, Contemporary Issues, lists the class resources as articles from all major media organizations. That's leaving our kids completely exposed to the potential for the teacher to influence thinking by choosing particular media outlets over others. And how do we know the teacher is presenting opposing sides of the issues? We don't, and that's a problem. So if our school board members and administrators aren't going to be transparent with the parents, we cannot trust you. And if we cannot trust you to be honest with us, how can we trust you with our children's education? I hope the examples I discussed tonight will be investigated, and the workshop will help to develop strict guidelines around how we address these issues. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Jameson Bietis.
In August, the school board, after the recommendations of Drs. Faley and Hoffert, voted to deny freedom in the form of parental rights to medical decisions regarding children. Henceforth, I encourage parents to refer to the Wilson School Board for what it actually is right now, the Wilson School Politburo. Forcing children to wear masks when there are only 50 cases per 100,000 people across the county, nearly 900 square miles in size, is insane. Simple division, not taught in 3rd grade at Wilson, by the way, reduces this to 1 case per 2,000 people, or 1 case per 18 square miles. Luckily for this board, the mask mandate insanity of our governor and secretaries of education and health have returned to save the day, just in time for the statewide board meetings happening tonight. Isn't that ironic? Guidelines and mandates from federal or state bureaucracies have no legitimate legal power and do not make a public school administration the law of the land. How dare you deny freedom to parents, especially after pushing Marxist racial equity hysteria for the last year? Clearly, you need a reminder of where freedom, independence, and power come from. Every person in this room was created with natural rights. These rights are self-evident, meaning they require no explanation. My rights to life and liberty exist because I exist, period. Government, on the other hand, has 0 rights over my natural rights. Confused? The pen of the great Thomas Jefferson explains further. To secure these natural rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. The Wilson School Board before us is actively abusing the natural rights of parents and their children with its mask mandate, as is the governor and the secretaries. Certain members of the Wilson School Politburo before us have shown clear disregard for and serious usurpation of Pennsylvania sunshine laws and the creation and implementation of their equity task force. In order to end this corruption, I call for the Wilson Equity Task Force to be dissolved and reformed back to a Student Services Committee under new leadership that will follow state law. For their active roles in allowing and or perpetrating this government corruption, and for recommending tyrannical school health policies, I call for the immediate resignations or terminations of both Superintendent Faley and Assistant Superintendent Hoffert. I call for these changes to be made with immediate effect. Further, in order to provide for future security of our children, we must elect new school board members. For those school board members here who violated state law regarding corruption, we don't need your resignations. You'll be given your walking papers when we, the people, go to the ballot box, and we'll see you in November.
Brian Shavinsky.
Excellent job on the name. That's why I did it phonetically. Showing leadership is what this board has shown over these difficult times. Your role is a thankless one, a difficult one, and please continue your good work. Masks as a requirement was and is the correct choice. Having an equity task force is the correct choice. These actions will continue to make Wilson a school of choice. Fostering fear, uncertainty, and doubt, like we've heard from some people recently, equating issues to a civil war. You think that would get me mad, but I'm just really disappointed because our community is better than that and should be better than that. Despite the difficulties vocalized by a small minority, our community supports the board. And I encourage all of you watching from home or watching a video later on to email all the board members your support, and if possible, next meeting, come here and voice your support also. Thank you.
That's all the comments.
All right. Any other business before the board? Yes, Mr. Martin.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
Mr. Negrini, go ahead.
The last time we were together here, I did
indicate and provide to the rest of the board the template from the Paso Robles Joint Unified School District regarding CRT within the Wilson District. That topic has continued to allow for further discussion on a proposed resolution. I have been engaged with my fellow board members and Dr. Faley in terms of appropriately wording a resolution. As I said last meeting, and as has been said by other members of the community, in terms of establishing what the equity policy is, it is equally important to establish what the equity policy is not. And so we will continue to have those discussions, to have appropriate wording so that that proposed resolution at some point will come before the board for a vote and discussion. Which takes me into the second point that I'd like to bring before the board and the community. There was an open letter that was sent to the National School Boards Association that should have also been sent to local school boards. I did not see it in the Pennsylvania School Board Association magazine this particular month, but it comes from the organization 1776 Unites. The letter is dated Monday, August 16, 2021. The National School Boards Association and local school boards. Thank you for the vital leadership role you play in ensuring schools empower all of our students to acquire the core American values and knowledge essential for citizenship in our racially diverse, multi-ethnic, and pluralistic democracy. A peaceful and prosperous American future must be built on a shared understanding of our past that is accurate and truthful, but is also celebratory and aspirational. The prevailing narrative of racial grievance has been corrupting the instruction of American history and the humanities for many decades, but has accelerated dangerously over the past year. The most damaging effects of such instruction fall on lower-income minority children who are implicitly told that they are helpless victims with no power or agency to shape their own futures. Also concerning are the results from the National Center of Education Statistics 2018 National Assessment of Educational Progress. Alarmingly, only 24% of 8th graders performed at or above NAEP proficient standards for the civics assessment, and only 15% did so for the history assessment. These dismal achievements in gaining and understanding a democratic citizenship, government, historical facts, and perspectives across time are low across all student backgrounds and virtually unchanged from the benchmarks established 2 decades ago. Given these urgent crises, the undersigned submit this letter in the spirit of offering a resource and hopeful path forward for educating our children. We represent a nonpartisan and intellectually diverse Black-led alliance of writers, educators, thinkers, and activists focused on solutions to our country's greatest challenges in education, culture, race relations, and upward mobility. The Woodson Center's 1776 Unites initiative stands in unqualified opposition to any curricula that depict America as irredeemably racist, teach that the legacies of slavery, racial segregation, and other appalling crimes are insurmountable, or fail to provide examples from history of Black achievement against the odds. We ask that your schools instead adopt curricula that, rather than completely reject our founding values, instead embrace the ideas of family, faith, and entrepreneurship that have enabled all Americans, including Black Americans, throughout history to move from persecution to prosperity and will continue to do so for generations to come. We propose including in your school's offerings the Woodson Center's 1776 Unites curricula, which map to social studies, English, and social emotional learning standards. 1776 Unites offers authentic, motivating stories from American history that show what is best in our national character and what our freedom makes possible even in the most difficult circumstances. The curricula maintain a special focus on stories that celebrate Black excellence, reject victimhood culture, and showcase the millions of African Americans who have prospered by embracing their country's founding ideals. The lessons have been downloaded more than 17,000 times across all 50 states. Some of the topics: continuity, not rupture. 1776 Unites confronts the realities of slavery and racism in American history while also recognizing them as betrayals of our founding's highest principles. Leaders like Thomas Jefferson are celebrated in our history despite, not because of, their personal and political failings. The struggle of Americans to rise and realize our own values is part of our story and always has been. Dignity, not grievance. While dealing frankly with the grim realities of racial segregation, 1776 Unites also shows how Black Americans have seized their own destiny and flourished despite harsh restrictions, as demonstrated by the development of nearly 5,000 rural schoolhouses overseen by Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald. These schools became resources of local pride and helped close the white-black learning gap. Resilience, not fragility. Knowing the achievements of the past helps students better understand their responsibilities as American citizens. A lesson on the Woodson Principles, which celebrate individual responsibility and strength in the face of adversity, asks students to draw vital support from family, faith, community, and participation in civic life. Embedded within the achievements of American history are the tools of self-betterment and self-renewal that our country has always developed on the journey to become a more perfect union. Our children deserve an authentic vision of that story, one that will help them to achieve their own human flourishing. Teaching the next generation is a consequential privilege that we know you and the legions of teachers in our school systems take seriously. We ask you, as stewards of public school systems around the country, to lead by example and embrace materials that will inspire the next generation, like those before them, to overcome challenges, achieve their goals, and live in a spirit of service to the common good. We invite all those who are committed to quality education and fostering a genuine interest among our young people in how inspiring lessons from our past inform our path forward to contact the 1776 Unites. And that is signed by a number of prominent professors, CEOs, folks in the legal profession and otherwise. I'm happy to provide a copy of that to anyone that is interested. Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
Well, a lot of people said a lot of things I was going to say tonight, especially about Thomas Jefferson. For the folks that don't know, I was going to be a history teacher. I love history teacher from the, but they talked me out of it, so obviously I'm not a history teacher. But I do follow history. I did a lot of college work in history from the earlier period up to the 1900s. Thomas Jefferson, to me, was the second or third best president we had. I still think Abraham Lincoln was the best. But, quotes, a lot of people quoted Thomas Jefferson, and I'm going to quote him again. Not to bore you, but I think these folks are pretty smart, especially some of the topics that we're dealing with today, even electoral college. These people don't really understand that electoral college, how it works. But if you look at the wisdom behind that, it makes a lot of sense. But one thing I just want to, before I get on a little bit of a roll here, let's see if I can find it. If you like Jefferson, you like history, you should look him up. But he basically said there is no justification for taking away individuals' freedom in the guise of public safety. So I suggest, if you like him, he has a lot of quotes that are relevant to today. But what I want to talk about is, in addition to that, is I got a call from a principal outside our school district, and also a couple of teachers outside of our school district. I was kind of amazed at the stuff that they know that's going on in our school district that I did not. Some people alluded to it about the flags, not in the classroom, some teachers turning it on and off. And he suggested to me, the principal suggested to me that we consider in our next in-service day for teachers a class on being neutral. He feels that Wilson has kind of like fallen into the extreme where you've got some people on the right, some people on the left. Both sides of the teaching spectrum have taken some liberties in the classroom. So I really would recommend for discussion in the next board meeting, a in-service workshop based around neutrality and presenting neutral information to students. Somebody mentioned, I don't know if that's you, Jay, about somebody mentioned about the news media. Well, it is. It swings from left to right, and that's a good discussion. You can have, CNN, you can have Fox. That should not be something that a teacher would determine whether that's right or leftist. So you should be given that opportunity to research. Whatever you want to use as your research engine is fine, but a teacher should not direct you. So, Mr. President, that's what I'm suggesting for review for next board meeting. Thank you.
Any other business before the board? Looking for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Martin, do we have a second? Okay, thank you, everyone.